Jeffrey Epstein's ties to government intelligence agencies are extensive. All evidence that I can find will be laid out in this video. You're watching Corruption Report. We'll start in 1974, when Epstein was hired by Donald Barr at the prestigious Dalton School in New York City. We should note that Donald Barr is the father of William Barr, who became the U.S. Attorney General under Donald Trump in 2019, who actually presided over the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's death that was ruled a suicide. So back in 1974, Donald Barr hired Epstein with zero experience and zero licensing as a teacher. The hiring of Epstein at the private school was extremely unusual, and it reportedly confused the staff. Within the span of 1 year, Epstein was under investigation and fired. While teaching at Dalton, Epstein met Ace Greenberg, chairman of Bear Stearns, one of the most storied investment banks in Wall Street history. Epstein was teaching Greenberg's son, eventually becoming close with the Wall Street executive. After Epstein was fired from Dalton, Ace Greenberg hired Epstein at Bear Stearns and was unusually fast-tracked and promoted to partner, where he worked with high-net-worth individuals. This is where he learned the art of money laundering. He specialized in offshore accounting. Now, once again, Epstein had no prior experience in this field and was not a licensed financial advisor. After 5 years at Bear Stearns, he was fired again, this time for breaking internal banking rules and insider trading. He was internally caught with no legal repercussions. After this, he created the company IAG, Intercontinental Assets Group, and from their own description, Epstein was a, quote, high-level bounty hunter who helps clients recover assets. He was once again specializing in helping people hide and keep money offshore and away from regulatory eyes. It was this specialization in offshore banking that I believe was most attractive to intelligence agencies. In the 1980s, there were all these sketchy arms deals happening, and CIA front companies were often involved. These agencies have been known to utilize offshore banks for their front company purposes. During this time, Epstein becomes involved with a man named Douglas Leese, a UK national who was a part of numerous arms deals and was widely regarded as an intelligence asset. At the age of 28, Douglas Leese brings Epstein to the Pentagon for purposes we still do not know. Douglas Leese was essentially the conduit through which Epstein was introduced to Robert Maxwell, Adnan Khashoggi, and Stephen Hoffenberg. These are all important names that you will continue to hear throughout the Epstein story. Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, owned multiple newspaper and media companies and was an intelligence asset for numerous agencies, allegedly British and Israeli. Adnan Khashoggi was a Saudi arms merchant who has a verified connection to Mossad and funneling arms between Israel and Iran. Robert Maxwell and Adnan Khashoggi became mentors of Jeffrey and reportedly used his offshore banking expertise in their world of international arms deals. And then there's Stephen Hoffenberg, who paid Epstein $25,000 per month for his consulting services towards a massive Ponzi scheme called Towers Financial Corporation. Hoffenberg was imprisoned for the Ponzi scheme and always claimed that Epstein was his co-conspirator and a mastermind behind the fraud. But Epstein did not get in trouble. Instead, he reportedly worked with law enforcement informing against Hoffenberg, and all mention of accusations against Epstein in the court documents vanished. So up to this point, Epstein managed to be involved in all kinds of sketchy behavior, has been hired for positions he wasn't qualified for, has been fired multiple times, yet he somehow keeps failing upward. Now he's entrenched in this world of offshore banking and arms dealers with heavy intelligence connections. For example, Robert Maxwell was integral in financing and selling software to the US State Department that was eventually revealed to be spyware. This spyware was monitored by Israeli intelligence and was installed on vast numbers of US government computers. It is through Robert Maxwell that Epstein meets his daughter, Ghislaine, who eventually becomes the co-conspirator of the sex trafficking network. In 1988, Epstein created the J. Epstein Company, and the J. Epstein Company, as self-described, accepts only clients with over $1 billion in net worth. 1988 is a year where there are only 140 billionaires in the world. At this time, he somehow signs Lex Wexner as a client, the founder of Victoria's Secret. Wexner, who was a committed Zionist and has donated and worked with the Israeli government, signs over his entire portfolio to Jeffrey Epstein and eventually signs over complete power of attorney to Epstein, a move which is unheard of, highly unusual, and highly suspect in the world of finance. Epstein starts transferring many assets from the Wexner portfolio over to his own, including multiple properties in Ohio, and famously the massive Manhattan penthouse directly next to Central Park, which was the largest private residence in Manhattan at the time. Wexner claimed he allowed all of this because Epstein was a, quote, money wizard. However, many people believe it had something to do with blackmail. Another unexplainable client situation is with Leon Black. He was one of the richest men in New York with a $9 billion net worth, founder of the Apollo Group, one of the largest private equity firms in the world, and from 1997 onward, he has a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein to the point where he puts him on the board of the Black Family Foundation. And it eventually comes out that he transferred $170 million to Jeffrey Epstein for, quote, tax advice. Now, Epstein was not a licensed financial advisor, he was not a licensed tax professional, so why were these super rich people transferring hundreds of millions of dollars to him? Is it simply money laundering? Is it some sort of blackmail? I think so. So 1991 to 2005, Epstein has gained control of the Wexner empire, incredible sums of money and real estate has been transferred to his name. Ghislaine Maxwell has now entered the picture, and we learned from Ghislaine Maxwell's eventual trial that some of these Ohio properties transferred to Epstein were used for their sex trafficking purposes. Over the next few years, Epstein and Maxwell established their Palm Beach property, the private island Little St. James in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the famous private jet called the Lolita Express. Now, for extra context of what Epstein's reputation was within these ultra-rich circles, in 2002, Donald Trump told New York Magazine, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said he likes beautiful women as much as I do. And many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." So this quote dates Trump and Epstein's relationship all the way back to the 1980s and shows us what kind of open secret Epstein's sexual life was. So in 2002 is when the first mainstream article was written about this Jeffrey Epstein character. Journalist Vicky Ward in Vanity Fair magazine is tasked by Graydon Carter, the legendary editor, to write about who Epstein is and how he seems to know anybody who is somebody in New York. However, Vicky eventually uncovers evidence of his relations with underage women, of the intelligence connections, and of Epstein's alleged crimes. She does this by going out and interviewing Stephen Hoffenberg in jail and other people close to Epstein. Now, in the process of writing this piece and before the article is published, Vicky Ward and Graydon Carter are allegedly threatened. Carter received a bullet and a severed cat head at his New York residence at the time they are looking into Epstein. And John Connolly, a former Vanity Fair editor who worked on Epstein-related stories, told NPR that he believed the incidents were intended to intimidate Carter and discourage reporting on Epstein. Connolly also claimed that Epstein personally visited Carter at the Vanity Fair offices to express his unhappiness with the article's direction. Epstein allegedly uses the threat of legal action to shut down any mention of his intelligence ties, underage girls, and all of it is dropped from the 2002 Vanity Fair article. This shows his power at the time, the power to shut down Graydon Carter and to control one of the largest magazines in the world, telling them what they can and can't say. Now in 2005 is when we get the first real legal investigation into Epstein. In this case, a 14-year-old girl was lured by Epstein and Maxwell, and her father complains to the Palm Beach Police Department about being sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. And this leads to undercover investigation by Palm Beach PD, where they are able to connect multiple underage girls who have been lured by Epstein and his associates to the compound. They eventually use a search warrant where they find hidden cameras, sex toys, and proof of underage sex crimes committed by Epstein. They have him nailed dead to rights for at least 20 years worth of prison time under state law. Next, Epstein hires filthy rich lawyers who pressure the police department, and Palm Beach PD turn to the feds for help. And the feds are supposed to have more resources through the Department of Justice to deal with cases like this. The person who's in charge at the time is a man named Alex Acosta. He is the U.S. Attorney of Southern Florida. The new investigation was launched under him using FBI resources. The larger case they developed was called Operation Leap Year, and Leap Year uncovers evidence that Epstein has an interstate sex trafficking operation involving girls as young as 13 years old. So we have a secret federal indictment against Jeffrey Epstein where they lay out all of this evidence that should put him away for the rest of his life. But what happens next is a sweetheart deal that is only explained through direct top-down intervention from the most powerful corners of our government. Epstein hires Alan Dershowitz and a bunch of George Bush-connected lawyers, and suddenly they strike an unprecedented non-prosecution agreement that is agreed upon by Alex Acosta and Epstein's legal team. Now, it should be noted that during this time of investigation and negotiation, Epstein fled to Israel and relocated a number of his assets there, according to Vicky Ward. Now, typically, a suspect is not allowed to flee under these circumstances, but of course, for Epstein, there are no consequences. So while he is in Israel in 2007, he enters into the non-prosecution agreement. And despite the mountain of evidence of the sex trafficking operation, the only charge brought against Epstein is the solicitation of prostitution from a minor, and Epstein must register as a sex offender. The conditions of his non-prosecution agreement say that he must spend 18 months in the Palm Beach County Jail, he has weekend release, and he's allowed to leave prison 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for, quote, work release, to do basically whatever he wants. During the 18 months, he spends more time outside of jail than inside. On top of that, the non-prosecution agreement grants immunity for all crimes that were under investigation in the indictment to Jeffrey Epstein and all unindicted co-conspirators, including Ghislaine Maxwell. So this non-prosecution agreement grants sweeping immunity of all crimes that were named in the secret indictment for both Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. What normally would result in multiple decades in prison for Epstein ends up being the least harsh non-prosecution agreement basically ever. Although Epstein did have to register as a sex offender, so it became public knowledge that he at least solicited prostitution from a minor. This knowledge, however, did not stop people like Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew from spending lots of time with Epstein. In fact, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak stayed at Epstein's home dozens of times after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Now, under federal law at the time, the victims had the legal right to be informed of this non-prosecution agreement. Yet for some reason, the agreement was kept in the dark. This violated federal law. And these victims fought for justice until 2018, when the courts finally ruled that the Epstein non-prosecution agreement violates the rights of the Epstein victims. It's under that ground that the non-prosecution agreement terms came out, were overturned, and the Southern District of New York was able to arrest Jeffrey Epstein on new charges. After this, the rest is history. In 2019, Epstein is arrested and killed in prison before any trial can take place. The cameras in prison were broken, turned off, or the footage was deleted depending on which story you believe. It was ruled a suicide, yet a third-party coroner concluded that the evidence surrounding Epstein's death was more consistent with homicide than suicide. And this is when the public loses it. They do not believe the official narrative being told by our government and the mainstream media. Now, more than ever, people are researching who Epstein was and why he was able to get away with this for so long. People are discovering his ties to Maxwell and Khashoggi. People are questioning our own government's involvement with this monster, and public confidence in these institutions is hitting an all-time low. With each statement that came out from Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, or Donald Trump, people could smell that something was off. This was much bigger than Epstein. Seemingly endless politicians, celebrities, and titans of industry could be involved. People are scrutinizing Donald Trump's cabinet choices, notably Alex Acosta, who was chosen for Labor Secretary. So Vicky Ward, through Vanity Fair in 2019, reports that Alex Acosta, while he was being screened by the Trump transition team for his eventual role in the administration, was asked, "Why did you back off the Epstein case?" Acosta said, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." He said he was told to back off and that Epstein was above his pay grade. So after Trump selected Acosta to be his labor secretary and this whole Epstein link becomes huge news, Acosta holds a press conference to address some of this. He is asked specifically about intelligence ties with Jeffrey Epstein and whether he would confirm this. He says, quote, "I would hesitate to that reporting as fact, but he would not deny it." Later on, he is asked on the record by the Office of Professional Responsibility whether he had any information that Epstein was an intelligence asset. He said, "Absolutely not. I did not have information." He is then informed that he is allowed to speak about this in a classified setting if he would like. Now, the actual transcripts of this conversation have not been released, and that is important because the actual wording of their questioning matters. Being an intelligence asset versus working with an intelligence agency are different, and agencies can use all kind of legal speak to deny someone being an official asset or an employee of their organization. Like I said before, intelligence agencies use all kind of fronts and shell companies to conduct their operations. They go to great lengths to be able to deny their involvement. So where this leaves us is with the whole string of times Epstein was able to fail upward. With each time he was fired, caught breaking laws, and arrested, he seemed to have someone or something protecting him. And the fact that he fled to Israel during his initial investigation, the fact that Robert Maxwell was a Mossad and British intelligence asset, the fact he was able to get billionaires to transfer so much money in real estate to him, the fact that he was initially hired by Donald Barr, whose son becomes Attorney General under Trump and presides over Epstein's alleged suicide, the fact that none of the cameras were working when Epstein died, the fact that Alex Acosta agreed to that insane plea deal and is eventually selected to be in Trump's cabinet, the fact that Acosta reportedly said Epstein belonged to intelligence, the fact that Epstein specialized in offshore banking and was mentored by Robert Maxwell and Adnan Khashoggi, two arms dealers connected to intelligence agencies, the fact that Stephen Hoffenberg spent decades in prison for Towers Financial Corporation's Ponzi scheme, yet Epstein was an informant, the fact that Epstein's secret indictment is still classified by the Trump administration, who ran on releasing the Epstein files, and the fact that Epstein and his co-conspirator Jean-Luc Brunel were both found dead in prison without the cameras working and were both officially ruled a suicide. All of these facts together point to one obvious conclusion. Epstein had the help of government intelligence. CIA, Israeli, British, maybe all of the above. Was their primary interest in Epstein's offshore banking expertise? Did they use him to help with arms deals through Maxwell and Khashoggi? Did they also use him for blackmail collection through his sex trafficking operation and his properties outfitted with hidden cameras? I'll let you decide. I gave you all the evidence that I could find. If you want to hear my unfiltered opinion on this scumbag and the governments involved with him, join my Patreon, where I just today uploaded a video describing all my personal thoughts on this. Subscribing on Patreon is the best way to support this channel. It empowers me to make more videos like this, reporting corruption in the ruling class. So as always, thank you for watching, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.